Everything seemed perfect at Downton Abbey. The grand halls were full of laughter, the servants moved with purpose, and the family looked as proud as ever. But behind one quiet smile, a storm was waiting. It was not a scandal or war this time. It, too, was something no one could stop. One final goodbye was coming, and when it arrived, it broke everyone in the room. This was not just another scene. It was a goodbye that felt too real, too personal, and it left the audience wiping their tears in silence. The film opens with the familiar sound of wheels crunching gravel as a car arrives at Downton Abbey. The sun is shining on the estate, and the house looks untouched by time. Inside, the Crawley family is preparing for a celebration. Edith and Bertie have returned from London with their child. Tom is helping organize the garden party. Even Mary, usually wrapped in duty, appears lighter, her son George running through the halls. The staff downstairs is equally busy. Mrs. Patmore is shouting orders in the kitchen while Daisy smiles quietly, watching the family's happiness. Mr. Carson, though older and slower, still carries a sense of pride in every step. Everything seems normal. But in the drawing room, the Dowager Countess, Violet Crawley, sits by the window. She watches her family with a softness that doesn't match her usual sharp wit. As the family gathers for tea, Violet makes a dry joke and everyone laughs. The camera holds on her face a little longer than usual. Her smile fades a bit too quickly, and her hand trembles slightly as she lifts her teacup. It's a small moment, easy to miss, but it plants the first seed of something deeper. Later, Mary walks into Violet's room carrying old photo albums. She finds her grandmother sitting quietly, looking through letters tied with a ribbon. Mary jokes, but Violet doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she looks at Mary with a deep, knowing gaze. Everything is in its place now, Violet says softly. Mary frowns, confused. "What do you mean?" she asks. Violet changes the subject with a smile, brushing the question aside. But Mary is not fooled. Something has changed. At dinner that evening, Robert raises a toast to the future. He praises his daughters, welcomes the younger generation, and calls Violet the unshakable heart of Downton. The family claps and Violet nods politely, but her eyes glisten just for a moment. As the guests leave and the night grows quiet, Violet sits alone in her room. She writes in her journal and places it beside a box filled with keepsakes. The music fades and all that remains is the sound of the wind against the glass. This was the calm before the storm, the beauty before the heartbreak. And though no one knew it yet, Downton was about to face a farewell that would change everything. It didn't happen with a loud announcement. There was no scream or sudden fall. The truth came quietly, hidden in a folded paper tucked inside a private letter from a London doctor. Violet had known for weeks, perhaps even months. And yet, she chose silence. She didn't want to worry. Her family. She wanted to watch them laugh a little longer, smile without fear, and walk through the house as if the world wasn't about to lose its oldest light. Mary found the letter by accident. It was on Violet's desk, half hidden under a book of poetry. At first, Mary didn't understand what she was reading. Then her eyes froze on one word: terminal. The room around her blurred. Her breath caught. This wasn't some temporary illness. This was goodbye, written in ink. Mary went to her grandmother immediately. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know whether to cry, shout, or deny it altogether. But Violet just looked at her calmly, with that same unshakable grace she always had. "I didn't tell you," Violet said, "because I didn't want to be mourned before I was gone." Mary tried to argue, but Violet gently touched her hand. "You've always been the strong one. You must be strong again." The days after that changed everything. Mary tried to pretend nothing had happened. She smiled at the breakfast table, discussed flowers with Edith, and even helped Mrs. Hughes arrange the guest rooms. But her eyes told a different story. She would glance at Violet when no one was watching, as if to memorize her face. Violet, too, was changing. She began spending more time walking the grounds. She asked to see the old nursery. She started giving away little things, rings, books, scarves. with a quiet smile and no explanation. Only Mary knew the truth, and it was tearing her apart. She wanted to tell the others, but Violet made her promise. She wanted one last season at Downton without pity. She wanted laughter, not tears. One evening, while the sun dipped low and the family gathered in the salon, Violet told a story from her youth. Everyone laughed at her sharp humor, but only Mary noticed how Violet's voice wavered near the end. When Violet left the room, Robert leaned toward Mary. "She seems tired lately, don't you think?" Mary nodded but said nothing. That night, Mary broke down in her bedroom. She had held it in too long. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. She wasn't just losing her grandmother. She was losing the last piece of the Downton she had always known. The weight of the secret was too heavy. Violet knew it wouldn't be long before the others noticed, but she wanted to choose her moment, her way. And as she looked out the window at her beloved estate, she whispered to herself, "Let me leave with dignity, not sorrow." In the shadows of the night, one legacy prepared to end even as the rest of the house dreamed on, still unaware that the heart of Downton was quietly fading. It happened on a day that looked like any other. The sky was gentle and blue. The birds sang and the house was busy with quiet joy. No one knew it would be the last day they'd hear Violet Crawley speak. No one thought it would be the final time they'd see her eyes sparkle with wit. That's what made it so cruel. The way endings come wrapped in peace, the way the last goodbye doesn't knock, it whispers. Violet had spent the morning in her garden chair, a book in her lap, though she wasn't reading. Her mind drifted as she watched the flowers sway in the wind. She had always loved that spot. It overlooked the hills, the land her family had protected for generations. That morning, she asked for something strange. She wanted to speak to Mary alone. Mary entered with a steady face but trembling hands. She already knew. The moment had come. Violet took her time, looking over Mary as if trying to hold her in memory. She didn't speak at first. Then she finally whispered, "Promise me you'll carry Downton forward with grace, with fire when needed." Mary knelt beside her. "You know I will." Her voice cracked. Violet smiled. "You were always more like me than you wanted to admit." And then her hand reached into her pocket. A letter. A final message meant for the entire family. Written, in her finest handwriting, sealed in violet wax. "Not yet," she said. "Later, after." Later came sooner than anyone expected. That afternoon, Violet asked to lie down. Mrs. Hughes helped her to bed. Edith came by with news from London. Robert made a joke at the foot of the bed. Violet smiled for all of them, even when her lips were dry. And then she closed her eyes. The room grew still. It was Mary who saw the change first. She stood slowly, walked over and called her name. Once, twice. No answer. Her hand reached for her grandmother's, but the warmth had already started to fade. Silence filled the room like a flood. Edith stepped back, her mouth open in disbelief. Robert looked lost, like a boy. Tom held Sibby close, unsure what to say. Mary did not cry. Not yet. She sat beside Violet's bed and whispered something only the two of them would understand. Her shoulders rose with a single breath, then dropped in surrender. The letter was opened that evening. It was short, sharp, and filled with love. "My dear ones, do not remember me with tears. Remember me in your laughter, your quarrels, your dinners, your dreams. You are the best of me, and I leave knowing Downton is safe in your hands." By morning, the house felt different, colder, quieter. Even the light seemed softer. One chair, in the drawing room, stayed empty. One voice was missing from the table, and one scene, just one, had torn through even the strongest hearts. Viewers didn't just cry. They sat in silence. Because it wasn't just the end of a character. It felt like saying goodbye to someone real, someone who had been there from the very start, and now was simply gone. The sun rose the next morning, but it felt different. The light touched the windows of Downton Abbey gently, as if it too was morning. Inside, the halls were quieter. The usual sounds, footsteps, distant laughter, teacups clinking, were there, but softer, slower. Violet Crawley was gone, and with her something deep and unspoken had left the house. But grief doesn't pause time. Life moved on, though now every step forward felt heavier. Mary wore black, not just in her dress but in her expression. Her eyes were still sharp, but now they carried the weight of knowing. She had lost her guide, her match, her mirror, but she didn't fall. She stood taller, spoke clearer, and made decisions with a new kind of strength. Violet had passed her the crown, not in title but in spirit, and Mary wore it with quiet pride. The staff downstairs tried to keep busy. Mrs. Patmore cooked more than usual, though her hands moved slower over the vegetables. Mr. Carson, who had seen many deaths in the family, still paused every time he passed Violet's door. It remained closed, the curtains drawn. No one had the heart to open it yet. Edith returned to London, but not for long. Something about her mother's death made her feel distant from city life. She began to visit more often, spending time with her daughter in the countryside. And for the first time in years, she and Mary sat together without fighting. Grief, it seemed, softened sharp edges. Robert tried to stay strong for Cora, who sat in Violet's favorite garden chair every afternoon. She didn't say much. She just looked out at the roses. And sometimes when the wind blew a certain way, she smiled faintly, like she could still hear Violet's voice in the breeze, giving her one last bit of advice. The most unexpected change came from Tom. Quiet, dependable Tom, who once felt like an outsider, now stepped into a larger role. He helped with the estate's finances, worked closely with Mary, and became the bridge between tradition and progress. Violet had once questioned his place in the family. Now, everyone leaned on him. But even through all the grief, Downton didn't fall apart. It adapted, just as Violet had known it would. Her memory was everywhere, in the old furniture she once called impossible, in the sharp jokes that now belonged to Mary, and in the deep pride the family carried as they continued forward. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from a distant cousin who had heard of Violet's passing. He wrote, she was the last true lioness of her age. And he was right. But even lionesses leave behind legacies, strong daughters, sharper minds, and houses built on more than stone. By the final scene, the camera pulled back from Downton Abbey once more. It stood tall, unshaken, timeless. But now there was a different light in its windows, a new voice in its halls, a quieter strength, but no less powerful. The end was never really the end, not with Violet Crawley. Her story, her words, her presence, she had become part of Downton itself. And that's why this scene didn't just bring tears. It brought a deep, aching love. A reminder that some goodbyes never truly end. They echo, softly, forever.